Hi everyone, welcome to this bonus video. I'm here with my good friend and entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur I should say, Patrick Lee. So I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of background about Patrick. Patrick, you've started 6 companies, all right? And the most famous of them you probably know, he's the founder and former CEO of Rotten Tomatoes. And how many years ago did you start Rotten Tomatoes?
Started in '98, sold in 2004.
Cool. Yeah. So obviously, Rotten Tomatoes is a very recognizable brand, and it's a big consumer internet play. So and now you're working on another company, and it's a gaming company, right? So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
It's a company called Hobo Labs. We're making synchronous multiplayer games for iOS and Android.
Okay, awesome. So the reason I asked Patrick to come and record a lesson for us is Patrick is what I call he's a super networker, so a very connected business networker, and he has. I have benefited. How many business connections do you think you've made for me? Quite a few, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So over the past year and a half, at least, so quite a few, and he's very well connected in Silicon Valley, and also he has a secret group that has basically, I want to say, all tech titans. Anybody, it's a who's who of tech. Is it just tech or?
Tech founders.
Yeah, tech founders and VCs, MVCs, and or you have founder VCs, but
founder VCs.
Founder VCs, yeah. And I can't even tell the name of the group. It's a secret group, and it has chapters in Silicon Valley. And how many cities?
LA, New York, Hong Kong, Tokyo.
Okay, all over the place. How many members?
130.
130. Okay. So the reason I think Patrick is qualified, uniquely qualified, honestly, to give this lesson is because he's a successful entrepreneur and he's a very successful networker. He's really good at it. But he told me a while back that he used to be an introvert, or he is an introvert. But
I am.
Yeah, he's an introvert. But despite being an introvert, he's very effective at business networking. And he told me a story about, back in the days when you were at Rotten Tomatoes. And do you want to repeat that story?
Yeah, sure. I mean, basically, my co-founders and I at Rotten Tomatoes, we were all just nerdy, shy guys, just working on trying to make a good product.
Right.
But then when we had a chance to sell in 2004, we didn't optimize on it because we didn't know anyone. We didn't have a way to really get many competing bids. We didn't even know if it was the right time to sell. And if we had a network like the network I have now of people who would give me advice and connections, it would have made a big difference. And what I realized was I was the CEO. Like, I can't expect my 2 co-founders, one was the CTO, one was the creator of Rotten Tomatoes, to have done that. Like, that was my job. And the thing is, when you have an opportunity to exit, you only get so many of those ever.
Right.
Like, regardless of how many companies you start.
Right.
And it's not the kind of thing you can just trial and error your way through. You only get 1 or 2 shots ever. So it was my mistake. And so after that, I realized, like, I have to go and get better at this. Like, this thing that was a huge weakness of mine, just being very shy, introverted, to get out there, to network, to start trying to do more public speaking, things like that.
Okay, so what year was the switch? What year did you make the switch?
We sold in 2004, and over the course of the next year or two, I realized, like, that we didn't do a good enough job on that part.
Okay.
We could have done much better.
So you did a switch. So it is interesting. This is actually, when he told me this story, I think he told me this story about 2 years ago. I've known him for, I think, 5 years or 5 or 6 years now. And since I've known him, he's always had the biggest network of anybody that I know. And that's why when he told me the story, I was surprised. I'm like, I could never imagine Patrick not having the network that he has today. And the reason that I asked him to come and give this talk is because I'm an introvert. A lot of people around me are introverts, and introverts, if you're an extrovert, you have no difficulty. Most extroverts have no difficulty networking, but it's a lot harder for introverts. And I think if you're watching this video and you're an introvert, I want you to walk away with two things. One, that is a tangible lesson that he learned the hard way, meaning he needed to sell his company, Rotten Tomatoes, but he didn't have a network. That is a tangible, hard lesson. And you really don't want to learn things that way. You want to learn from mistakes or, failures of others. Like, in this case, Patrick went through, it is a hard lesson at a very, at an expense to him that he learned the benefit and importance of networking. And you guys don't want to go through the same thing. You want to learn from him that, how important networking is. So be very proactive. For introverts, it takes extra effort. And honestly, after he told me that story, I started thinking, okay, I need to be proactive, even if it feels like it's unnatural. I'm gonna push myself to do more of it. The second thing I want to leave you guys with before I give the floor to Patrick to record his lesson is, if you're an introvert, it is still possible to have a huge network. It is possible. And here's case in point. I have him in front of you guys. And, he's got this massive network of business contacts, and that didn't come naturally to him. He had to work really hard. So if you walk away with those 2 points and obviously learn from him how to do it, but just know that it's important to learn how to network, and it is doable even if networking and mixing up with other people doesn't come naturally to you. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna cut to his lesson. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Patrick Lee, and today I'm going to be talking about the Introvert's Guide to Networking. So before I begin, I guess I wanted to say that I'm still an introvert. I'm quite shy. If you put me into public places, public events, it wears me out. I actually need to be alone a lot of times to recharge. And even now, if you put me in an event where I don't know anyone, I'm not actually good at networking in that situation. But what I've done is try to come up with my own system of making contacts, of networking, where I don't need to be put into a situation where I have to just walk up to people cold and say, hi, I'm Patrick, etc. So I came up with a list of tips. First tip is basically when you go to an event like a mix or whatever where you want to meet people, bring friends, go with friends. And when you do that, as you guys will naturally meet a couple of people, make sure to introduce each other. So introduce your friends to the people you meet and have them do the same, or your friends might already know some people, and that makes it really easy to connect with people when they do that, when you get an intro. This way you also end up meeting everyone that your group meets, because you all share those contacts immediately at that event. Next tip I would say is start a group. So one of the easiest ways to make contacts is actually, if you want to do it within some industry, say VR or whatever, go and just make a group about that. Go and actually organize your own events. And if one already exists that's doing well, go to that. Volunteer, find the people who organize it, volunteer to help them. Because once you do that, if you start a group or you join a group, you end up being on the inside. And it's much, much easier to meet people when you're on the inside. When you've started a group and you're doing events, you can invite guest speakers once you've gotten enough people to start attending. And once you invite those speakers, because you're the organizer, it's very easy to meet them as well. When you hold an event, one tip that I think is really important, at least what I feel, is make sure that when you're there, you're actively connecting people together that you think should connect at that event. The reason why is, again, it's much easier for them to talk to people. They might be introverts themselves, and when they come to your event, they want to meet people. That's like the main reason why they would go. And when you're actively introing them, you're giving them a lot of value that they might not otherwise get. Let's see. When you're meeting people, I feel like you should be very authentic, be friendly. Don't try and do business immediately. Like, that's a major turnoff for anybody. Just make friends. And actually, I believe that if you can't get along with someone, if you don't like them, don't even bother trying to make them add them to your network, because they won't have no value. And especially if something's like they seem shady or whatever, you never want to introduce someone to that person. So if you don't get along with them, don't even worry about connecting with them. Another thing I do is I take notes. So after I meet people, maybe get business cards, whatever, I'll actually make a note of where I met them. Oh, it was at this conference, it was at this event, or we were traveling or something. I also keep a track of interesting points about that person. For instance, like where they're from, if they have family members like their wife or something. Just because if you meet a lot of people, it gets hard to remember everything. And so I actually use like my contact list. I put the notes in, and that actually helps as extra memory for me. Another thing I do at events is, after an event, is follow up. I think that's really important. Basically, when you meet someone, that's your first point of contact with them. But then what I always try and do is, every single person I meet, I send them an email saying, like, it was nice meeting you. It doesn't take that long, but that email is essentially your second point of contact with them. And I think the reason why that's super important is, typically, if I give out like 10 business cards, maybe one person is going to write back to me. But what I try and do is, if I get 10 business cards, I write back to all 10 of them. And because if you're that one person out of 10 who actually writes back, they're going to remember that, and it's very valuable. I also try to, if it's business related, like send everyone LinkedIn requests, and if I really got along with them well, possibly a Facebook request. For people who are really interesting that I connected to and I had a good rapport with at an event, I might actually also say like, hey, why don't we meet up for coffee or something? And if you do that, that's like a third time you have contact with them. And pretty much after like 3 points of contact, they're part of your network. Like, they are a contact at that point. The next thing I would say is to share your contacts. So once you've started making good contacts, it's important to share them. And whenever you think there's a good connection to be made between two people, usually what you do is I would check with both sides and say, like, I'd like to introduce this other person. Is it okay? And assuming both of them are like, that's fine, and generally they almost always say it's fine, then you do a quick intro. A good networker is also a good connector in my opinion. And a good connector shares their contacts freely, and they don't ask for anything in return. So here's why. I believe that it's not a zero-sum game, meaning like, if I share contact with someone, I'm not losing that contact. And if anything, if I make a connection, my connection with both people actually becomes stronger. So also, when you share contacts and you're helping people, very likely they want to help you back, like even if you don't ask for it. So say you're in a room of like 10 people and everyone has 10 outside contacts. And if everyone else holds their contacts and doesn't share it, but you go around and you freely share your 10 contacts with all of them, very likely most of them will share their contacts back. All those people in the room would end up with 20 contacts, their 10 plus the 10 that you gave them. You would actually have 100 contacts. You would have all the contacts. So what you want to try and do eventually, as you get more, like a bigger and bigger network, is to become what I call a super connector. And that happens when you've built a very large list of contacts and have a strong connection with a lot of them. And once you become a super connector, what I find is actually, at that point, you almost don't even need to network anymore actively, because people are going to intro folks to you all the time, because they know if they connect someone to a super connector, then it makes them look good, and it adds a lot of value to the person that's being connected to the super connector. So that's kind of like the ultimate goal, is try to reach that stage of like being a super connector, being someone that knows a lot of folks. So with this in mind, using these tips, I feel like you rarely ever have to go up cold to someone to try and connect. You can just be friendly and authentic, be yourself. You share your contacts freely, and you just help people by connecting the relevant people together, just because it's like you want to do that. And then if and when you become a super connector, then people will actually start sharing their contacts back to you. And so that's my major tips for having an introvert network. Thanks.
So it was fascinating. It was actually amazing how systematic you're approaching networking. So I had two major takeaways from your lesson that I want to kind of amplify and call out. One was if you guys have been members of Mentor Box and you received our box last month, one of the things that we covered in the box and through the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So one of the habits is highly effective people are always looking for win-win situations. So they never consider any game or anything that they're doing, any project, as a zero-sum project. So they give a lot, basically. And you effectively do the same in networking. So now I better understand why you keep handing me these, because that comes back to you. So when you connect people and don't expect anything in return, actually what happens is that it comes back to you 10 times more, right? Mm-hmm. So do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Like, I want to amplify this point. I think it's very important for you guys to actually hear this out.
Well, I learned about this actually from one old mentor a long time ago before I was doing Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay.
And he mentored a number of startups between me and my friends.
Right.
And he was always helping us with connections, mm-hmm. and just helping. And really, like, he made a big difference in our lives. And I kind of picked that up from him, where he just did it, and of course we wanted to help him back.
Right.
But he never like asked for anything, and we did offer a lot of things to him later.
Okay.
And so I just kind of picked up the same habits, and I really thought it was the right way to do things.
Okay. Yeah. So it's actually very interesting, and I think it is something that people. It's a very simple trick. I don't know if it's a trick or not, but it's a very simple habit to form. You know, you keep giving and thinking of other people, and it comes back to you over time. So especially with something like networking, like it never it's free. You can make introductions for free. So why would you try to keep your arms around and just protect your network at all times? Okay, that's interesting. So that was the first point I wanted to amplify. The second point is actually a very interesting observation. I was watching his lesson, and this is the best way to describe it. He's very systematic about it, but at a very high level, he wasn't good at the game of being sociable. So approaching people cold turkey and basically making friends on the spot. So what he did is that he changed the game. So he wasn't good at the game, so he created a system where he's good at it, and that is being very systematic. And all these tips that he gave you, and hopefully you're gonna watch the video again, and if you're an introvert, you can implement a similar system, or maybe even have your own twist on it. But the point is that he never tried to be someone that he wasn't. Like, he never tried to be project that outgoing personality. So what he did was, one, he acknowledged it, that he's not good at the game. Am I interpreting what you said, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so he acknowledged it, and then he designed a new game where he's really good at. As an engineer, he's able to think about how to create a system where he can beat the system, basically. So, all right, that's interesting. One final note was, so you're a super connector, right? And some people explain to people. You are, like I said, Patrick is by far, and I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs, I can tell you, Patrick is by far the most connected person that I know. And not just connected, like he knows a lot of people, he knows a lot of really powerful and well-known people through his group. And that has a lot of benefits. And, tell people why, to what extent, how far should they push this? Like, should they try to be like you, be a super connector, start a network, or should they just take the basic skills and just, like, basically what I'm saying is that, is there a plateau of benefit? Like, should they continue to spend a lot of energy on it? Like, the more the better, or it's something that a little bit of it is obviously very useful. but you know, maybe for some people, a little bit of it is useful. You see what I mean? So what is the answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think following some of these tips will help anybody. And it kind of goes with your comfort level. Like as you do it, if you're starting to build a bet network and if you enjoy it, if you enjoy connecting people, all that stuff, then keep going. It also depends on how busy you are. If you're doing a startup and stuff, you can't be spending all your time going out and networking. I try to do it in a very efficient way where I can still run companies and stuff and still do this.
Yeah, you somehow make it happen. I mean, you're an entrepreneur right now and still, okay, so
I would say, yeah, like basically try it out, see if it works for you, and then just kind of keep going with it. You don't have to try and become a super connector, but if you really enjoy it and you find you really enjoy connecting people, all that kind of stuff, then it may happen naturally.
Okay, all right. Thanks for the lesson. It was very entertaining and useful and helpful. I hope a lot of you guys benefited from it as much as I did. Thank you.
Thanks.